Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record. Today being Friday, the 10th day of November 2017. I want to thank you, our listening and our viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman and by extension For the Record into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. For the Record is a show produced by the staff and management of Radio Cayman, and it is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. I am your host, Orit Connor, my two co-hosts, Ms. Theresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve Macfield. You can join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. Our phone lines are always open. There is always someone there waiting to take your calls. You can call us on our toll-free number provided courtesy of Flo. That toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. You can also email us at fortherecord. That is one word, For the Record, at candw.ky. And now our new feature, our WhatsApp number. You can send a text or you can leave a voice note at 925-3261. I will repeat that, 925-3261. You have the ability on that WhatsApp number to either send a text or you can leave a voice note, and we can then play that voice note to our other listening and viewing audience if you want that to occur as well. First of all, I want to extend condolences to any persons, any families who have lost loved ones in the past week. Of note, I'd like to mention Mr. Denny Warren in the passing, of his wife as well. We send our condolences out from Radio Cayman and all of my co-hosts and guests here in the studio as well. As you know, Mr. Warren is, quite prominent in the Cayman Islands. He's I think a photojournalist, as well as political commentator. Has been a candidate in the elections before, and you always hear his voice on the radio shows, calling and expressing his views and everything else. And we know also the charge that he made. I shouldn't call it a charge. His leadership in terms of medical marijuana and the use of it here in the Cayman Islands as well. So we just want to extend our condolences to him and his family, her family, and to all of the other families who may have lost loved ones during the course of the past week as well. Today being Friday, it is Opposition Day. It is my pleasure to have in the studio with us this morning MLA Mr. Arden McLean, and of course you know that he represents the District of East End. District of East End has featured prominently in the news recently. The primary school, we see there where actions were taken by parents there in protest over what they consider to be insufficient teaching resources there for them as well, and we will talk about that. We're seeing people in the Cayman Islands becoming not just more and more vocal, but also turning into activists, and that can be viewed as a good thing. It can be viewed as extremely concerning as well, because what makes it extremely concerning is that when people have to go to those lengths to get their voices, to have their voices heard, and not only to have them heard, but for their concerns to be addressed, then that is when it becomes concerning. So with those few words, I want to say good morning first to my co-host, Ms. Teresa, then Dr. Macfield, and then we will say good morning to Mr. McLean, and let him kick the show off after that as well. Ms. T.
Hi, good morning to everyone, those in the diaspora and those of us living here. And, you know, and wishing you also a very pleasant week as we embark on the Pirates Week, I think. What I was going to say and what I was thinking about as I drove here this morning was the way in which the East End matter was organized. And again, I repeat on the show about we live in very sensitive times here, and my hope, my faith is that we don't take the route that others have taken before this thing escalates. And when you see certain things in the media which tends to devalue the worth of the Caymanian people, and of course shame is something that you can't really unpack, and when, you know, the level of degradation escalates, and the response that we're seeing now with the Caymanian people, for me that's worrisome in a sense, because it's not really the Caymanian way. So I always encourage discussion and dialogue all the time. But now that you see Caymanians, for example, responding to things that they care about, like their children, their education, the way in which education is not taken as seriously as they believe it ought to be taken. What about when they start getting really concerned about employment issues, health issues, and those other things that are of great and significant value to themselves? And with that, you know, I'd like to welcome Emily, Mr. McLean, usual Dr. Macfield, and yourself, O.C.
Okay, Dr. Macfield, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. For the Record.
Comments.
Good morning, Mr. For the Record. Good morning to Ms. Teresa Pitcairn. Good morning to our guest, the Honorable Mr. Ard McLean, the MLA for East End, representative for East End. Good morning to all the people in Brady and For the Record land, locally, and those are abroad. It's a good morning this morning, and I will be very brief because I would just like to ask the MLA, Mr. McLean, what has happened to the position of the Speaker since the last 2 weeks when he held certain members of the Legislative Assembly in contempt. And we now know that the Speaker has no jurisdiction, no right, no lawful right to hold anyone in contempt in the legislature in the Cayman Islands. That was a unfortunate position. We would like to know what has happened to that. And because the Speaker presides over the proceedings in the Legislative Assembly in recognition of the judicial character of the presiding officer, duties. He has no right to hold anyone in contempt. And if there was ever a contempt situation, the Speaker would have to call a privileged committee together and refer the matter to them, and they were the ones who would have to go out and investigate the matter and bring a report back to the House, and it would be the House that had to decide whether or not the MLAs were in contempt. The second matter I would like to ask him about is the fact that the Speaker is supposed to be the presiding officer. He's supposed to be completely impartial. He should not be attending caucus meetings or committee meetings, and now he's active in the Finance Committee. That is not in keeping with the role of a Speaker. The Speaker should never be in Finance Committee. I spent all yesterday and last night until 2 o'clock in the morning trying to find a place where in the Commonwealth parliamentary diaspora, or whatever you call it, a Commonwealth situation where a Speaker is a member of the Finance Committee. A Speaker is never a member of the Finance Committee because it involves partisan activities, partisan politics, and that's where a Speaker should not be. And I would ask Mr. McLean this morning, why are they allowing the Speaker to be active in the Finance Committee?
Okay, we're going to take a commercial break first, and then when we return, that'll give Mr. McLean some additional time to answer all the questions that we have so far, and I'm sure that there are many more as well. Please stay tuned.
534-8255. What is on your mind when it comes to the government, independence, and the opposition? Issues that matter to you. 1-800-534-8255. Waiting to hear from you. For the Record, with your host, Auret Connor.
Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve Macfield, and our guests this morning from the official opposition MLA, Mr. Arden McLean. Mr. McLean, good morning, sir. Welcome back to For the Record.
Good morning, O.C., and good morning, Dr. Macfield. Good morning, Teresa. And I left you for last. And good morning to the rest of your listeners. I have been bombarded here with two issues that you would like me to respond to. Let me respond to the one from East End first. About the East End School. What transpired up there, O.C. is right. Sometimes it's sad that, our people have to resort to these measures. It's really sad. But I would say to the country that, you first have to walk a mile in someone's shoes before you criticize them. This is not the first time this has happened. This is not the only school it has happened at. When we went and visited the schools, it spans the entire public service, where the lack of resources. Now, one of the teachers up there was put on required leave, and they have not replaced that teacher in the classroom. This happened 18 months ago with those same kids when they were in year 3. So we have to look at this thing objectively. People are concerned about their children too. And until the difference is with these 10 is that they stood up. The rest of the country is not standing up. And you have to applaud them for standing, despite what you may think about how they stood. You have to applaud these people for standing. I did what I had to do. I made it known to the authorities that this thing could not go on forever. In the previous incident, it was some eight weeks or thereabouts that before they could find a teacher to put in that classroom. Now it's more critical at this time because they're in year 5 and they're getting ready now to do exams to go over to 6 so they can prepare for high school. And we need to look at it from that perspective. Everybody wants their child to get educated. So don't crucify the people up there when they took their stand. Everybody takes their stand. I take my stand. Whenever I believe I'm right, I take a stand, and they are right. I want everybody to know that the people up there are right. They took their stand, and that's the end of it. Now, the government needs to respond. And I understand that they say they're going to have a teacher there today because the people say they wanted a male teacher. I don't know where they're going to find one, but I understand they found one. So, as far as I'm concerned, that matter is over. Okay. I don't want to hear anything about any investigation or anything. That matter is over.
And I'd just like to add to that in the 60s, remember that the Georgetown parents marched as well. That is how we ended up getting the secondary modern school
up at Schoolhouse Road. That's right.
Because of a near drowning.
That's right.
Out on the waterfront, where between Dobson Hall and the big school in front of Elmsley Memorial Church.
Absolutely.
And my mother was a part of that. People like Miss Francis, Miss Irma, all of those Georgetown parents. Miss Lilla Smith, all of them, they were involved in that.
Well, I can tell you what, if more Caymanians would stand up about the public school system, it would get better. Thankfully, they have now appointed Dan Scott and Darrell, those two I know on there, at the council level. I know about those two. Dan want results. Darrell is a stickler who needs results. So I believe that this country is in for change. Those who are in authority better be prepared for the devolution of authority to them. Are they going to walk away from it? We need to change the system. We constantly talk about the public system turning out people who are not functional. It cannot get any worse. It must get better.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about the Legislative Assembly, but we're not going to have a whole lot of time. So I want to take this opportunity to read something, and it talks again about our education system. In January of 1965, the administrator, Mr. John Comber, who had been appointed, he was in his second year in the Cayman Islands and at that point in time, and in his throne speech, because at that time, not only did he give the throne speech, he gave the budget and everything. It was all done by the administrator, who was the president of the Legislative Assembly. And he spoke about the runaway, fixing the runaway, the cost of it, that we had been given £200,000 grant by the British government, and then we had been given a loan of £150,000 that we had to pay back. So a total of £350,000 to build the runaway. He says, whilst I am confident that our building problems will be overcome in due time, I am far less confident about the ability of the Cayman Islands to produce its own doctors, lawyers, civil servants, engineers, and other professional men in the future. Indeed, it is no exaggeration to say that these islands will forever be dependent on the services of expatriates so long as our bright boys are permitted by their parents to forsake the classrooms at an early age in order to obtain unskilled jobs at sea. This problem requires urgent, serious, and prolonged attention by parents and educationalists in that order, because the government cannot compel these boys to complete their secondary education and then avail themselves to the many opportunities available for higher education. This is a matter for parental persuasion after consultation with the boys' teachers. A career at sea is an honorable calling, but there is no good reason why our brighter boys should sign on as cabin boys or unskilled deckhands when they could, after proper training, join the mercantile marine as junior officers. Our girls, on the other hand, do well at school and in the universities and at other training establishments. But this is not enough, because the future development of these islands cannot be assured until our young men can equal their sisters in the field of academic achievements. These islands cannot rely indefinitely on the services of expatriates and volunteers. These islands cannot, and volunteers from abroad to fill government posts which no Caymanian is able to fill, either because he lacks the ambition to gain the necessary qualifications, or because the duties are too arduous and the remuneration is too small. We need qualified Caymanian men who are prepared to devote themselves to the service of their people, and in return, this government must pay them salaries which will make these posts attractive. Can you imagine? That was being said in 1965. Mm-hmm. And I repeat again, people, we're saying it not necessarily the exact words, but
Similar words.
The tone and
Similar
the concept
words.
and the concept is there, is still there, folks.
I mean, we just did that last night down there as well. You know, I questioned the chief medical officer and why the position hasn't been filled. Keep acting. You know why? Because they don't want to pay for it. And you know how they are trying to now circumvent that? It's not, the pay is not attractive enough for the Caymanian. And they just keep putting them acting in there. And you know how they're trying to circumvent that? Leave the pay as it is and give extra incentives. Why they're doing that? If they raise the pay, it will be more in chief officer. Do you understand what we're doing
For a
in
medical
our country?
doctor?
The chief medical officer.
The chief medical officer.
Of the country.
You mean that a chief officer should be making more money than the chief medical officer of the country?
That's what
That's
they feel.
an absurd proposition.
Okay, folks, please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back immediately after the news. Don't change that dial. Lots to talk about. We have MLA Mr. Arden McLean in the studio with us. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me, Mr. Risa Pitkin, Dr. Steve McField, MLA Mr. Arden McLean. One of our listeners has said, based on some of the conversations that we've been having so far, that is why the speaker should be from outside of the Legislative Assembly. How can you keep the speaker from participating in Finance Committee? He's elected in a single member constituency and has to look out for his constituents like the other MLAs. If it was still multi-member constituencies, you could argue that his colleague could look out for West Bay. But now he has to represent his constituents on his own. He said, but well done to the parents of East End Primary. Sad when that's the only way Caymanians get attention for their children. So those are some of the comments that we received.
Let me just deal with that comment about the speaker. In the real parliamentary democratic world, a speaker never participates into confrontational politics or in Finance Committee. In fact, he does not even have to go in and compete for his seat in a single member constituency. It is known that this constituency in which he comes from, there's no competition for him to be reelected. He's automatically reelected, and it's the government that he hands the list of things for his constituents that he needs, and they the one provides it for him, so that he does not have to get down into the well of the floor of the House to be able to confront other politicians and in a partisan way. So to the reader, if they should, what's lacking here? There are courses in constitutional parliamentary procedure and constitutional history, so that people can understand the rules, and it would be better informed if they understand the rules of how it works.
So we want to, we want to emulate the Westminster system, but we sort of like cherry pick in terms of those parts of it that.
Well, I think everybody should read the book. Winner Takes All, and then you'll understand what we have done in the Caribbean. What we did was import the Westminster system, but we cherry picked off it for our own conveniences. Selwyn Ryan did a marvelous job of explaining that to us all, and maybe some of us should read that book. It's called Winner Takes All. Let me briefly discuss that writer, the first part of that writer's comment. Obviously, it's someone who is not familiar with parliamentary stuff by them saying that.
On the contrary, the person is.
It is? Yeah. You've not been there long, whoever he is. I can tell you that, and I can hear that. Never went nowhere either. Dr. McField is correct.
If you're trying to get out of me who it is.
No, I don't care who it is. I said it. Now make them contact me. My number is 916-0630. Dr. McField is right. The speaker removes themselves, period, from all part of politics, resigns from their party, and forevermore they are the speaker. That's it. Let me give you an example. In 2003 or 4 something, when England had a snap election, I was there, and Speaker Martin, it was at the time, whom I knew fairly well, right? And Speaker Martin the Speaker then goes to a re-election as the Speaker, not as a member of that party, running as the Speaker. An independent member went to run against him, an independent person. And the 3 major parties came down on that independent member and suffocated him, wiped him out. He must have only got like less than 1,000 votes or something out of tens of thousands of votes. They protect their speaker at all times, but he removes himself, he or her removes themselves. The speaker is removed from all party. They can remain members of the party, but they cannot hold any executive position in the party. That is what happens. The government provides all for that constituency when they have a speaker from on the inside. Whatever that speaker needs in the constituency, that is carved out. But all of the parties understand it. All the members understand. The process to reach a speakership is a very intense one. When the speaker resigns from politics, that's the end of that speaker. Okay? Never get back into politics again. So there may be 5 or 6 people who put themselves up who are eligible to be speakers when the speaker leaves. And the parties sit down and they go through the process of elimination. And they come up with one. And at the end of the day, no one else, that is who is confirmed in that position. Okay? Because of the importance of it. This speaker that we have here, and you know, he threatened me last night. I told him I got to deal with him this morning on this radio. And I guess they'll have to deal with OC too, because they've been dealing with him down there recently. The premier, that is now. This speaker threatened last night that he was going to, if I said anything, I'd be in contempt. I said, well, contempt was made for that. You can read that out as much as you want. As a matter of fact, there are 2 people on the floor right now that he has ruled in contempt. And Dr. McPhail, you're right. He got referred out to a committee, okay? But he can suspend for the sitting, which is that day. If the behavior in the House, based on the behavior of a member in the House, and if the member persists, he can suspend for that day. Anything about that, he needs to refer it to the House. It's the wishes of the House whether the members get suspended beyond that time. The Speaker. Now we may say that the precedent has been set here. Cap Mabry would come in when the Cayman Brack vote was being considered. Juliana as well would come in when the Cayman Brack vote was considered, but never getting into the minutiae of that budget. Edna never came in there at the time. But that's how speakers do it. This speaker is on the floor of a committee and trying to truncate the opposition right now. As a matter of fact, last night, there's an old tactic that we use in politics that, and the provisions are made for it now in the standing order, that at any time, any member can move a motion that the question be put, i.e., that all that stuff, and you put it to the vote. That's a little tactic that we use. McKeever used it on us when we were in the opposition, me and Kurt and Alden, at one stage over by Cork House, and they approved their budget in mass, one fell swoop. Yeah, but you don't expect that from the Speaker. He moved that last night to do a section of the Minister Rivers' budget in March, you know. Granted, we were out of the chambers and stuff like that, and yeah, the Premier said that we should make sure we're in there. That's true. But let me explain to the people of this country. Your Premier is now controlled by the Speaker, and I don't want that. You hear? That's the Premier handler right now. Whatever the Speaker wants, the Premier gives, and that should never be. So if they want contempt, they can all two of them can move contempt this morning, go back in the House, move contempt. That is my opinion. That is the perception that I see down there. You cannot expect to work in the spirit of operation, in the spirit of us all working together. For instance, the government is trying to go away, which we recognize. They have to go away. The Premier has to attend to the consultative meetings in England.
Joint Ministerial Council.
Yeah, on the 26th or 27th something. We know our timelines. The opposition has stayed there every night. Whilst we're doing that, the government ministers have other things to do at night. They have engagements. And other members have other engagements that were planned. So there may be 5 or 6 of them left there. Who makes up the quorum to make it go on? Us. We stay there too. That's the responsibility we have. Yesterday, you took a break, and we had to wait at least half hour each time for Minister Seymour to come back. But we sit and wait. That's in the spirit of cooperation and working together. We were out that chamber for 5 minutes, and the Speaker, who has no right to be in Finance Committee, in the minutiae of politics, in the partisan politics, because that's where it's at.
Now, when you say has no right, there's nothing in
nothing
that prevents him from being there.
But it is convention that the Speaker does not get down there, because it's the same people he now has to manage when we go back in the House as the Speaker.
I just want to clarify the part that
this is precisely why the Speaker keeps himself away from that. You didn't hear us coming on the radio talking about Julie when she was Speaker. You never heard us doing that. You didn't hear us doing that when Edna was there. No one did it. Yeah, the now Speaker and Speaker Moyle gotten a lot of entanglement on many occasions because that he was challenging the chair, which is fine if that's your choice. But you don't. Linford never got into that, where he has put himself back into the partisan politics. He never did. And he brought a different perspective to the speakership. Now, the Speaker and I are constantly at war on the floor of the committee right now, because he's telling me I'm talking too much. Well, that's how the people of this country know what their government is doing. They rely on me as the opposition. For instance, how would I have known what we thought was, in the spirit of cooperation, the Premier invited us all to come to Cabinet to do presentation on behalf of our constituencies in July. We attended that meeting on the 25th of July this year, and it was in the spirit of and on the basis that whatever we were submitting would go in to form in the budget. There were presentations. I did a presentation with proper cover and everything. And I never go to Cabinet without a jacket. I don't want them be there, but I got dressed properly. I got to respect that position. I submitted a lot of stuff for the people of East End, and after consultation with people. So when I don't know if I should say shadow, but the minister that I shadowing, Minister Hugh, he is responsible for works. And I saw a big lump sum of money for capital development of roads. So, of course, if I just leave that, the people would never know. I need to question it. That's my job in the opposition. Okay.
Have to take a commercial break here. When we return, we will continue with our conversation with MLA Mr. Arden McLean. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with us this morning, MLA Mr. Arden McLean. Mr. McLean, you mentioned Finance Committee. We're talking about Finance Committee. You mentioned also your appearance before Cabinet, which the Constitution allows for. You mentioned the fact that many times it's the opposition who forms the quorum for Finance Committee because of other obligations and commitments that the government side may have. Can you explain also to our listening and viewing audience the opportunities that you get in Finance Committee where you would not otherwise get the opportunity to ask questions of certain individuals, not as individuals, but because of their position in the Legislative Assembly as well?
Absolutely. But just let me finish that little piece about me questioning that block vote of monies.
How much was it?
Something like $14 million over 2 years. You got to remember, this is a two-year budget now.
Yes.
And I'll get to that about the opportunities that opposition members are given throughout the Commonwealth, wherever. So when I questioned that block vote, it was revealed that the only place capital road works will be done over the next 2 years is Georgetown West Bay. The East and Cayman Brack and Little Cayman, which is under a different vote. Mm-hmm. The Eastern Districts, Bordentown, Northside, and East End gets no capital works on roads. So they say, well, we got it in the maintenance money with NRA. They'll do the maintenance of roads. Well, that's the regular thing to do.
That's an ongoing thing every day.
Ongoing thing every day. Because what they have done now is taken $10 million out of where you remember the law with NRA, it's mandated that NRA must get certain percentage of the license fees and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. They have now taken $10 million and put there under that on that basis, which is for maintenance of roads. So here we are. In the absence of the opposition, no one would know. But nevertheless, the speaker is sitting in that house, in that committee, not the house, in the committee, tell me I'm talking too much, because that's what they want to do. They want to curtail all those questions so that nobody knows what they're doing. Let me get to you.
But I must say that most of the ministers have, in terms of answering questions and allowing their staff to answer questions, have been, based on what I'm hearing, pretty much cooperative.
Oh, they have to, because you ask them the questions. Mm-hmm. And we insist that we get the questions answered. Mm-hmm. But they want to truncate us, like moving the motion for a block vote. That's what they're doing. Well, you're talking about ministers being cooperative. They're in disarray when one minister is questioning the other minister. You never do that. Governments never do that. You don't question your minister. You're supposed to know what the minister is doing.
Or take him aside and ask the question.
Absolutely. Or you could say something like, Minister, would like to talk to you about this matter later on, or something like that. Or you don't say anything and then talk to the minister afterwards. You talk about opportunities. The opportunity to scrutinize the budgets lies with the government. The government brings the budget, And the obligation then lies with the opposition to scrutinize, because everybody in the government bench knows what it is. Thus the reason why you have opposition, so that the public then knows what the government is doing with their money. You get that once a year. In our case now, it's once every 2 years, which is even worse, which even in my view requires a more robust questioning period, because it's 2 years. When you see two amounts there, you never get that opportunity again until the end of that second year. But when you get a government who has such majority, like this one does, not government and administration. Let's get that straight, because that unholy matrimony that happened there the other day is not good for our country. I guess that's contempt too now. It is at that point where the speaker was rejected resoundingly at the polls twice. Twice. He ran party.
When you say rejected,
hang on.
Can you expand on that in terms of he was elected?
Hang on, he was rejected.
But he was elected.
He and his policies were rejected twice in this country.
Okay. That's
the country said, we do not want McKeever to run our country. The people of this country made that resoundingly clear. They say whatever West Bayers want to do with you, that's their prerogative. The majority of the voters are not in West Bay. The majority of the voters are outside of West Bay. There were good people running on that ticket, and the country refused to vote for them because they knew that they were going to put McKeever back in power in this country. Now, we, the other 18 members, went against the wishes of the people of this country. I was part of it too. If anyone is to be blamed for his behavior and what he is doing to this country, it is the members of the Legislative Assembly after they were elected. They put him back in power. It was us. And we must be held responsible for mistakes or omissions or our actions, whichever way you want to call them. Now we have that unholy marriage between the two biggest political rivals in this country. I don't know how Kurt went left, because Kurt was Alden, handled at one stage. Now it has become McKeever. And okay, everybody's going to say I'm not using their, putting handle to their name. They're equal with me as duly elected representatives when we go to the polls. I respect those positions. There is no written saying that respect does not beget respect. Okay? Respect begets respect. The Premier got up the other morning and lambasted us about having respect for the chair regardless of who's in it. And I said across the floor, respect begets respect. If you don't show me, I ain't showing you. That is simple. That is natural justice. You must respect me, Dr. McField.
But it doesn't matter. But when it comes to the procedure in the Legislative Assembly, it doesn't matter if the Speaker does not respect you. You always have to respect the chair.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. You have to always
you must bow to the ruling. Bow to the ruling of the chair, and I understand that. Mm-hmm. But the chair must also respect that we are adults and we have a job to do. And we are members of that legislature. Sat there by the people. We didn't come in and walk in there. And it's unfortunate that the two of them are treating the members of parliament, and in particular, the members of the opposition, in the manner in which they're doing. Now I know this morning I gotta get my chastisement when I go there. I've been chastised many times, you know.
Okay, we're going to take a commercial break now. When we come back, we will set you up for some more chastisement as soon as we return. Please stay tuned. For the record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with us this morning, MLA Mr. Arden McLean. I want him to continue, but just before he continues, we all applauded the fact that the proceedings in our Legislative Assembly are carried live so that people can listen. Not only are they carried live, but they're rebroadcast on Radio Cayman afterwards as well. Does the activity and the comportment of members of the Legislative Assembly, is that affected in any way by the fact that these proceedings are now carried live, that people can hear? When we didn't have recordings in there or live debate, we know that there were still issues. For instance, when Alan Scott, I think he was the last governor to be also the presiding officer in the Legislative Assembly, and we finally got that simply because they could no longer, they were no longer prepared to tolerate what he was doing, especially with the opposition. Does the fact that the proceedings are broadcast live or rebroadcast have anything to do with what is happening now, where people have a stage that they can perform from?
No, see, I think it was worse when they didn't. and let me explain. Mm-hmm. There's a member which this country does not know, but it's known within a tight circle of people. Before we had radios or television, pull down his pants in there. So
pull down his pants.
Yeah.
Who pulled down their pants?
Shall remain unnamed.
That is within a very close circle of that fraternity, because one member questioned the other to the president that he was telling a lie as to where he was. He had been off him so long, and the president was querying his whereabouts. And when he came back, he said that he was seeking medical attention, and one member questioned that, the authenticity of it, and it was something to do with his buttocks that he was away for, and he pulled his pants down to show them. That's the kind of stuff that used to go on there. So I don't know if we can say that.
We don't want to see that this sitting.
It was worse. It was worse. I mean, the national hero took the mace and walked out with it and dropped it and
broke it
because he believed he was right. Mm-hmm. He stood up for what he believed in. But the premier, I must say, in his response to the thing, he did say that it's no church. This is not church or Sunday school, and you're advocating on behalf of the people that put you there, and you have to do that, and there are rules within there that you must stay within, with respect.
We have one caller. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Morning, Mr. O.C. Good morning to Mrs. Pitcairn and Dr. McPhail.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Good morning.
MLA McLean.
Good morning.
Going to jump straight into it, sir. Interesting that you're giving us the context of what happened there. I think it was last night. But sir, given the fact that you're on a hard stop and there's a tight deadline, shouldn't the opposition be anticipating these sort of tactics being deployed by the government in order to catch you guys out and to meet their agenda? Because ultimately, we've seen that politics in Cayman, or politics in general, is one big game. When you have the leaders of the UDP, CDP, and the PPM joining together which is politically expedient for them, at that point, anything is possible. So shouldn't the opposition be on its toes at all times in anticipation of these sort of tactics being deployed?
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Secondly, given the fact that the union, as you call it, came together and the two leaders are beholden to one another, propping each other up, we can't tell who's really the tail and who's the dog in this situation, but they both need each other to survive. Didn't you guys anticipate the fact that the deal that was made between the UDP, CDP, and the independents, which was then scuppered by whoever's telling the story, largely the blame goes to yourself and Mr. Miller from Northside. Didn't you guys anticipate that there would be hell hath no fury like a or potential premier scorned, and you should expect nothing but a very warm time, given the fact that there was a deal on the table and then within 12 hours the deal fell away. So given the historical acrimony that exists, isn't this par for the course? So I don't understand how...
I said that earlier, that you expect this. This is politics, huh? You expect to be your opponent to use these tactics on you, but not the speaker. The speaker has no place there to be using it. I expect that from...
And my last question was, sir, in regards to that, if there are issues with regards to behavior or lack of objectivity or whatever the issue might be, I don't know, I don't understand any of the protocols. Hopefully you or the panel can educate us. What exactly is your recourse now if you find yourself to be put at an unfair or competitive disadvantage in this game of political chess, where the speaker fails to demonstrate the requisite level of objectivity in dealing with issues? And also, has there ever been a situation where the speaker participates in finance committee anywhere in the Commonwealth or where the Westminster system of parliament is used? So 4 questions there. Fire away. Thanks for educating.
Thank you very much, caller. I think Dr. McPhee, you mentioned one earlier. You want to repeat that for that last
I just
question.
want to listener, I have researched, and I have seen nowhere in the British parliamentary system, in Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, everywhere where the speaker is a member of the finance committee, that the speaker never comes down to that level. The speaker is always impartial. He never gets caught up into confrontational politics and so forth. He's not on those committees, because most time he has to rule on what those committees, the result of those committees. So he's never in those committees at all.
And I want everybody to know that there are no tears rolling down my cheeks. I ain't looking no pity. I understand this game. I am just saying. And he asks, what is the recourse? There's no recourse. That is gone. What we need to do is to ensure that we stay within the lines, white lines, never cross the yellow lines, and do not allow them to truncate us within those yellow lines. That's all we can do. The majority runs the country, you know. I am just saying that the manner in which it's done, the speaker should never be there. And in the interest of cooperation, we anticipate that, but sometimes maybe you get a little too close with them and you're not as lethal as they are. When they say we need to get out of here and stuff. And we work to make quorum while these guys have gone someplace else, you know, and I believe that is what we should do. That's our responsibility. The government needs to get on with running the country, and we need to assist with that. But when they then go and truncate you, it tends to make you wonder, you know. And I'm not crying. God knows. Many nights in my early days in the Legislative Assembly, I had to drive through back roads at Menelik, as Gilbert and Linford and Roy Borden and McKeewa Bush gave me because of fear of embarrassment. So I'm battle worn. I know what it is. But I just don't appreciate the speaker coming down there when he now has to rule and accept that report on behalf of this country, and he's participating in it.
Okay. Folks, please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back immediately after headline news.
I got to leave too because...
No, we got a few more questions for you before then.
They start at 9.
Oh, they're starting at 9. Oh, okay.
You think I want to get truncated again?
They might lock you out. Okay. Some closing comments we can give you, Mr. McLean, while we're waiting for headline news.
Yeah, and I would just like to thank you all for the opportunity to come on here again. And I know what my responsibilities are. I know that I have to be there, Dr. Macfield. I know that. But, we all have our vices. And, there were 4 of us outside yesterday when they did that, which was the member from Prospect, Georgetown Central, Newlands, and myself. And we were outside having a cigarette, and that's what happened. I like telling the truth. I want the country to know that. It's a political move. I'm not crying. I'm just saying the speaker should not be in finance committee moving those types of motions. Okay. I'd get it from the premier and one of his ministers or something. That's fine. I don't have a problem. We'll fight that out. But the speaker needs to be as removed from this partisan politics as possible. Mm-hmm. That's where you respect it then.
Okay.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. McLean. Folks, please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back immediately after headline news. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. It is just me, Dr. Steve Macfield, and Mr. Risa Pitcairn in the studio now. Mr. McLean has left. Finance Committee is going to start at 9 o'clock this morning, so he's left there. I'm going to shift gears for a minute because I'm not sure if I'll get another opportunity in the next few shows to do this. Again, going back to the administrator, John A. Comber's throne speech and budget speech in 1965. And in talking about politics, and I'm sure that you're all going to find this extremely interesting, he says, and I quote, "I draw encouragement from the fact that both parties," so we had 2 political parties then, "both parties are conscious of the many opportunities for progress which lie before these islands and are prepared to do something constructive about them. Indeed, it is not the result of a rash observation to state that the main difference in outlook of these parties is confined to the timing of constitutional development. During the past year, Mr. W.I.J. Wallace, the Assistant Undersecretary of State in charge of the Caribbean section of the Colonial Office, held a discussion with the party leaders, and after hearing their views, he informed them that their considered proposals for a constitutional advance would be received with interest by the Secretary of State. The door to constitutional progress is thus open. The result of our political stability has, of course, been of enormous value to the Cayman Islands. It has not only enabled much to be achieved in this assembly through wise and constructive debate, but it has also demonstrated that the party political system can work, and work well, in a small territory whose population steadfastly refuses to be divided by considerations of race, color, or creed. The success of our party system seems assured because there has been ample evidence in the past year to show that both parties and the individuals within them are determined to make it work, and that they are prepared to sink their differences of opinion when the interests of these islands can best be served by so doing. That was the administrator, right? A foreigner, right? Making these observations. And at that point in time, in 1965, his observation was that the parties were prepared to put aside their differences to work in the best interests of these Cayman Islands.
And in those days, you had the Christian Democratic Party and the National Democratic Party.
Yes.
The Christian Democrats were led by the late Honorable was it Farrington?
T.W. Farrington.
T.W. Farrington, and the National Democrats were led by the late Honorable National Hero O.L. Panton. And it was a turmoil, but it was an exciting time to be in politics at the time between the 1960 and 1965. I think it was one of the most exciting political era that Cayman ever had between the 1960 and 1965.
Okay. What he had to say about the civil servants, let's see what he said about it. He says turning one caller. Let's go to the phone lines then. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yeah, good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you. Yeah, my good friend, Dr. Mike Field, not to shun the others like Mr. Ard McLean and others, but I just say good morning, gentlemen. Listening to the rebroadcast last night, I heard, and I would call by name Mr. Hugh, explaining and talking about the roads and what they have accomplished and what their plans are. Gentlemen, my concern is this. We building a new airport for enormous amount of money, which is needed. The dock as well. But this is my contention, my concern. We expecting a lot of arrivals into the Cayman Islands in the next few years. If the government can acquire these properties, demolish people's houses to put through roads, can anyone, after I hang up, tell me who is the government and why is the government not saying to Mr. Dart, there's a few pieces of property on the 7 Mile Beach. We need to, whatever you want to term it, by compulsory acquisition or whatever you want to call it, we need one of these pieces of property because it is a sound investment, as I see it, like a bank. Local people can use it. They can put up other things there to attract tourists and visitors. What I'm saying, gentlemen, you're gonna
and lady,
you're going to really furnish all of these places with dock and airport for somebody else in their private properties. I mean, we are Caymanians. You know, we need to have a place where we can, generations to come say, well, this is our piece of property. This is an investment from the government. You have to pay so much or whatever if you want to set up a restaurant, cabana or something. But it is so disheartening to hear what they're spending. And here we are, 7 Mile Beach, as it is known, world-renowned, one of the best prestigious beaches in the world. And no one is saying anything about that. Gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to my concerns. So thank you very much, and all have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller. Well, there are locations, Villas of Galleon, where the Westin is. You know,
That belong to the government.
They belong to the government. We own it.
Yes.
Whether or not we will ever occupy it again is another story, because it is my view that once you enter into a 99-year lease agreement, and one that is subject to renewal after that, that those properties will never effectively fall back into the hands of Caymanians, or the Caymanian people in that regard. Once you give those leases.
Well, the Caymanian people own one of the most expensive pieces of land in the 7 Mile Beach too. They own that outright, and that is the government. That is the governor's beach,
yes,
and the land on which the government house is on. Now I can see 50 years ago or more, when that it was hard to develop land here because we didn't have the facilities to develop land inland, and then the government did what we did with graveyards. It was easier to build a graveyard on the sand on the beach side than to develop it inland, and that's why a lot of graveyards were built on the sand. And perhaps that is the reason why they put the government house down on the 7 Mile Beach, because it was easier to do that. But the time has come now where that land is so valuable to us now that it should not be just for one person to live in or to two people to live in. That land now should be allocated to Caymanian people so that they can build their own hotel and have their own hotel school and to be able to employ their own Caymanian people, and also a place where Cayman Airways can bring charter flights to give good rates to people. Perhaps it's time now, and for security reasons too. That's another reason for security reasons too. Because if people can come into the country in the nighttime, and the most wanted person in another country can come into the country, can breach our borders and come in the nighttime without detection, I think that we ought to be thinking about whether or not the governor would be safe on the 7 Mile Beach, on the beach, on the water, or not. Right. So it's particularly now the right time to start thinking about building a government house someplace inland that is secure and on land that is not as valuable as the 7 Mile Beach land, where the Cayman people can use that for their own use.
We have one call, but before we go to that call, I just want to comment on what you said there. Right now, the public has to use the little beach right next to the governor's, which is much smaller. I wouldn't advocate for it to be used as a hotel and government to set up a hotel. Governments have a terrible record when it comes to running tourism facilities, and even setting it up as a training school could be extremely expensive. And it's one thing to have a training school, but if you don't have the foundation where you have the opportunities for Caymanians when they become trained to be employed in those training schools, and that's another matter as well. But governments don't have a good record when it comes to running, facilities.
Well, it should go into what they do in other countries: PPP, public-private partnership.
That's probably
that's what they should do.
Yes.
PPP, public-private partnership.
Let's take the caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Gentlemen, I've listened with interest. I have two comments to make. First is that I agree with you that government shouldn't go into the business of establishing the hotel training school. Mm-hmm. From experience, the government is in a good relationship now with the tourism providers in the hospitality training school they have at the Universal College. These students do their internships at the various hospitality sites. When they do that, the hoteliers and the restaurateurs cannot tell them then, oh, we can't employ you because you don't know our system. Mm-hmm. So the drawback is that when we train the students and they get experience, it falls down when it comes to their employment. We need to get more and better enforcement in having our students employed when they are trained.
Yes, sir.
That's what I have to say on that point. Second point is, Andrew Morris Gerard in the 50s told us about what we were getting into when he called these people aliens. And he was a Scotsman. And he told us that we were selling our birthright for a mess of pottage. Mm-hmm. And it was he who was instrumental in setting up the land lease system. I have the documents. He didn't know what it was. He had to go to the government in Jamaica, the governor in Jamaica, and the government in Jamaica, under the governor, drafted the laws when he leased it to Benson Green, all that 7 Mile Beach. But it's the same thing and I wasn't the first person to say that. It's the same thing I said in 1978 when Truman Bodden maligned me and called me a Castroite. that we were developing the wrong thing because we were selling absolute titles to Caymanian land to people who did not understand our private property traditions and rights and protocols. When I bought land from you and you allowed me to traverse through your land to get to my land and we had no contentions. That's all the problems we have now with rights of way to the sea. So we are landless. And my last book that I want to complete explains what happens to the Caymanian people. It's called Family, Wealth, Class, and Status, the Political Economy of Land in the Cayman Islands. We are a landless people, and it's going to cause trouble in this country or in this society. And I've been saying it for years and years and years, because when you don't own anything, when you don't have businesses, and you don't own land, you don't have a vested interest, then what is to preclude you from tearing the society down?
Precisely.
That's
Yeah,
the,
precisely.
That's the
Yes,
concern
yes.
we
Enough
have.
said.
Yeah, that is the concern that we have.
And thank you, President Borden. And I know that your new book is coming out soon, and we would like to have a copy of it so we can critique it before it comes out.
I think he's left us.
I think he's left us, yes.
Let's take a commercial break for the record. One more call. You want to take the call now? Yeah. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yeah, gentlemen, sorry again, just quickly.
Sure.
As I was saying before, I can identify two pieces of vacant property on the 7 Mile Beach. One going to town just after Harbor Heights, and another piece where Victoria House used to be.
Yes.
I remember just not too long ago, it was a big stir up about the Smith's Cove. The government jumped on the bandwagon and secured that piece of property.
Because it was a coming election time.
Okay, thank you very much. What I'm saying, the government of the day should have the interest in at least securing one of these pieces of property as well, because I know they can do it if they want to. If the will is there, they can do it. So that is my second call to remind that there's still a few pieces of property on the 7 Mile Beach.
Yes.
Thanks again.
Thank you very much, caller. And it was recently, I heard in Finance Committee as well, that they've extended the Cowood Beach area as well, by buying property
next
to the south, the west of Cowood Beach as well. Folks, please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. We're going straight to the phone line as we have a couple of callers on hold. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, the Three Musketeers. I didn't realize I was on. I just like to say, the more I read the Caymanian Compass editorial, it's more hammered home why it's no longer called the Caymanian Compass. I noticed there where they mentioned, and I agree with you 100% what you said, Dr. Steve, about the land that the governor's residence is on, which is a residence for someone who isn't permanently here. They come and go, they change. And I don't know. I don't mean that it's given to them, but it's well, I guess you can call it that for the time they're there, and we pay dearly for their stay here also. They had an article or in the editorial where they're speaking about a new premier in Bermuda and saying that he's left-wing ethnic-centered, left-leaning ethnic-centered government. But when other countries do this and concentrate on doing for their people, no one calls them left-leaning and ethnic-centered.
Yes.
I don't know why. That's an insult to that gentleman. If he stands up for his people and said he's going to do a different type of government where we'll stand up more for Bermudans. And my God, how does the editor arrive at that conclusion is beyond me. When President Trump does it, when all the Germans and the British and get up and say that, you never hear them calling them left-leaning. The next thing they want to call the man a communist. The thing with us, I think when we can't have sort of an affirmative action. I do believe in what my friend Mr. Ormond says. There is a difference between the indigenous, or the Caymanian who is there by heritage, who's here, your parents, grandparents, and so forth. And we see where the United States has, but it's for minorities, we know that, but it's strictly enforced affirmative action, and it has helped. Many people might cry it down, and there are times when it goes a little bit overboard. But all government jobs, we have to have a certain proportion there of minorities. And it was, of course, to address all the glaring wrongs that were met out to colored Americans over the years. And it has worked. If you have a company, and a lot of companies do, large companies do business with the government there, they have to have a certain amount of minorities
hired. Yes,
staff.
yes.
And there's no reason why we couldn't say that too to companies, that they must have Caymanians on it. And we can define it because we do it for elected representatives. They more or less have to be indigenous Caymanians.
And there's certain other posts as well.
Thank you very much. I listen on. It's so wonderful. Your show should have an extra half an hour.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for standing up.
Next caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. O.C. and the rest of your panel there.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This is Donna Bryan, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to make a comment about the incident with the school bus on Tuesday afternoon. Sorry, I just called him because I just got the free number.
Okay.
I forgot it. And so I ride the school bus as a bus warden, and we stopped to let the children off in various different places. And most of the time, my bus driver will turn the bus more to the middle of the road to prevent people from passing the bus when the kids are disembarking the bus, because people will just pass the bus no matter what. And I have spoke about this a couple of times already. And it was just one of the evenings when my leg was bothering me that I did not get off the bus, because most of the time I get off the bus ahead of the children. And a police officer in uniform is who chooses to pass the bus while the children are coming off the bus, sir.
Wow.
And I did not get his license plate number, but I do know him. I'm not going to call his name, but I do know him. And this was about 8 or 9 minutes past 3. And this is ridiculous. And the thing about this is that we have really absolutely no control of those children once they exit the bus. Some of these kids will tend to, we always ask the children to walk in front of the bus. But some of these kids will run to the back of the bus. You imagine you're overtaking that bus and one of those kids shoot from behind that bus in front of your car? And I honestly believe and I pray to God this never happens. But that the government is not going to put something mandatory to happen with this until something like that happens.
What I suggest to you is that you call the police department. You want to speak to someone in authority there and give them the information. Despite the fact that you don't have the plate number, they may know where that individual was supposed to be positioned at that point in time. Yeah, no, I think you need to do that.
But the public passing these school buses when these kids are getting off the school bus, it really have to stop.
Yes.
It really have to stop before they hit one of the kids. And somebody's going to be in real trouble if one of those kids get hit coming out of the school bus. It only takes a few seconds for the kids to come off the school bus and go across the road. And not all the time that the kids are going across the road. A lot of times the kids are going on the other side. It just takes a few seconds of your time.
And the majority of people observe that. The majority of them, but you just get some of these people who, for some reason.
It surprises you to know who these people are. These big white collar people that I guess a lot of their children in them school buses in a way. But
thank you very much, caller. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you very much for that.
Have a blessed day, all of you.
Thank you. We have one more caller. Before I go to that caller, we have a few people have written in as well. It says, OC and distinguished co-presenters, it is disappointing that despite having a local law school, the number of Caymanians in the portfolio of legal affairs remains very low. One reason is that Caymanians who are qualified as lawyers eventually opt for private practice. However, there is only that is only part of the problem. The other problems are as follows. One, those qualified lawyers who decide to remain in government are not given appropriate promotions and are sometimes outright mistreated. Two, then there is the old issue of articles being difficult to obtain, even if one wants the article in the government. Three, the law school has artificial obstacles intended to severely limit the number of people who pass the qualifying examinations so that they become eligible for articles. For example, if you fail only one of the approximately 9 courses, you are considered to have failed the whole exam, and you can only resit that particular course with the permission of the Legal Advisory Council. Then you are allowed only 3 resits. In some countries, you are compelled to sit the whole examination only if you do not at least pass half of the courses offered. If someone has passed 7 or 8 of the 9 subjects, what is the point of compelling them to again sit the whole examination, including what they have passed before? All these things have combined to limit the number of Caymanian lawyers. And both of you as lawyers, I'll get you to comment on that as soon as we take this caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning to you, Mr. Host, and your panel there.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Thank you.
I've managed to catch some of this, what was being said on the radio. First, let me tell you this much. In Cayman, our system of finance committee is not evolved to the extent of Australia, Canada, UK, or New Zealand. In those countries, they have specialized finance committee, and they have a specialized finance committee, and it's not a committee of the whole House of members. They have a very smaller finance committee. So they have a different system for finance committee. As I said, it's not a committee of the whole House. In those countries, the Speaker is not challenged on anything. The Speaker is not challenged in his constituency. Do you think that will ever happen in this country? As I still have a constituency that needs representation, and I have to represent them, and if I didn't, the same one complaining now would be on your radio show, or some other one yapping his head off that I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. And I can tell you this, you don't bring the facts, because the late Captain Weber sat in Finance Committee, Dr. Linford Pearson sat in Finance Committee, the late Edna Moran sat in Finance Committee, and Mrs. Juliana O'Connor Conley sat in Finance Committee.
I think that was acknowledged, but what he said was that there were instances where they didn't. No, he didn't say that they didn't participate. What he said was that they didn't continuously sit in there. There were times when they would leave or come in, but they weren't there on a permanent basis.
They didn't leave because they couldn't sit, or they didn't want to sit. They have to do something.
Right. Okay.
And I have done the same thing.
Okay.
I had to go out. And as ministers have to go out, I have to deal with constituents, I have to deal with other matters. I don't come outside to smoke or do anything else. I sit there when I need to be there as a member. Until our system has evolved to that extent, then I have to represent my people. There are many ways that could be done. But the same way that they don't want to listen to the rules, and it's not rules that I have made, I just want to make you know, we have powers or immunities, powers and privileges law. And we have rules and conventions that we have to follow. And when I was being elected to that post, they were saying on your radio show, you better follow the rules. You better follow the rules. I am following the rules. The problem is they want some rules applied to them and others not so. I have not done anything wrong. And until such time that we have a different system where the Speaker's role is more recognized. I doubt we'll ever get to the point as it is in those other countries. Then my people are coming to my door and saying to me, I need you to be looking at this. I need you to be speaker. I want to hear your voice. I am the speaker. No, you might be the speaker and we're proud of you, but we still want you to represent us there.
Who needs to start the ball rolling on getting us to where we need to be?
Well, getting us where we need to be. We don't have the same country as Australia. We don't have it as England. We don't have those same things. We can modify, and we have done that, and we're doing that now, in allowing them to yap their head off and not pay the due respect, because they couldn't do that in no other country, no matter how much Ard McLean get up there. And as far as me, just let me say this much to you about the politics of it. As far as me losing, he should be last one. He win by a few votes. Mr. Almost never get elected, and so did Mr. Miller. And I can tell you that if I had run a candidate in Newland, Al-Suku wouldn't be elected. And if I had run one in Savannah, they wouldn't be elected either. And if I had run one in Central Georgetown, my friend Kenneth would not have got elected. I know how to play the politics, and that's what's wrong with them. The politics is the politics, and some people want the politics to be what they want it to be, but when it got to be applied to them, it's a bad thing. Well, if I had chosen there to be their speaker, and if I was such a bad person, why in the world they attempted so often to put me in a speaker seat? And as a minister at one point, no, the people of this country, I believe, are more satisfied with myself and Mr. McLaughlin, with them being the government per se, and I'm in the speaker's chair. The feedback I get, and I'm no political fool whether you want to say anything else or not. The feedback I get is the people are more satisfied with what is happening now than what would have happened with Ezard and Arden being leaders. So let them go ahead. I don't know that I am going to. I had an opportunity as Speaker to rule in contempt of the two members who came and didn't tell the truth. I spoke to the two of them, and I considered it. I said, no, listen, let's let this pass. We need to get the country to work. I need to continue doing what I said when I was leading the opposition. I was not going to do to people what they had done to me. But I do have to stand up. I have to follow some rules, and especially when they are so blatant and when they refuse to come in to make up the quorum. If government is so busy that some members are not there and we don't have a full quorum, they will stay out, and that's what happened this time with the vote. And that has happened many times. And block votes are taken. If they are not there in their seats, well, that's their fault. So,
and in other jurisdictions, that's why you have whips and stuff like that to ensure that they're there. Right?
You have a more evolved system. I would like to get to that point.
But
I'm doing quite a bit to get them, I think, to where they would be better off. I mean, right now there is no office in opposition. There's the premier, the family. There is nothing for us when people come here to see us, nowhere for us to go. I have asked for that. There is no security to speak out. And that is something that we have to do. There are a number of changes that I am doing for the benefit of those members. But the members got to sit in their seats and be ready when government is called. And that cannot be, no excuses formed for that unless you are a minister or you have constituents. But when he come outside,
Mr. Speaker,
and just come out just to smoke, no, it can't happen.
Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Your high status in the Legislative Assembly is reflected in the whole procedure and represent. If you look at the, Mr. Speaker, if you look at something called, I'm just going to find it here for you 1 minute. If my host gives me, it's called the House of Commons Procedure and Practice. If you get a copy of that and you look into it, you'll see that your high office as Speaker prevents you from even It prevents you from even having competition in your ride-in and
that's what I said earlier.
And so you don't need to have there would be no running against you, because everybody would recognize that as your seat, and you would not have to compete for that, so that you do not have to indulge into confrontational politics. And you would have your basket. You would have your basket of things for your district, and you would simply give them to the finance committee, and the government would make sure that you get all of those things allotted to you as speaker.
Go ahead, Mr. Bush.
But do you believe that Arden McLean and Ezard and a bunch of that group will ever allow that to happen to McKeever Bush? No, they don't believe that I should be elected, much to go unchallenged. No, we have not evolved to that. I know, I said that earlier. We have not evolved to that system. People still expect me, and people don't understand that that's how it goes in other countries. The speaker is not even challenged in their constituency at election. That, I doubt, will ever happen in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
until we get to that point, then where we can operate different. I don't go up to caucus, for instance. I have said, but I have to depend, to be re-elected, I have to depend on what the public opinion is. And so the public wants to hear from me, they need to see me. I still see people, I never stop. So if anybody thinks this is a cushy job, they're making a big mistake.
No.
I have to be the speaker, and then I have my district to run. And not only that, people from all over this country still wind up at my door.
Mm-hmm. So until the system insulates you from the political part of it, you have to do what you have to do.
Any speaker, not just me.
No,
any speaker,
yes.
Any speaker, and that's why Mr. Dr. Pearson, the late Captain Mabry, the late Edna Moyle, and Ms. O'Connor Conley, that's why they were coming to Finance Committee, because the people, they know they will get challenged.
Yes.
And the people have to see them. So Mr. McLean can yap all he wants, but until he understands that I am not going to be a pushover for either one of them, then I am going to continue to do this until we get a system where it is recognized.
Well,
but they're going to follow the rules. He can yap all he wants, but he's going to follow the rules, and it's not going to be twisted rules to what Arden McLean says. That I can tell you.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd say you have an assistant in your office now, and what you also need is a legislative, a legal person in your office also to guide you and to help you to develop the system as speakership that it should be.
Well, that's what we do. That's what we're doing. We hope to get to that point. The Premier has said that we will become autonomous in the first quarter of this year, and so yes.
And that autonomy will include you having your own budget and being able to present what is needed from a resource standpoint for the Legislative Assembly.
Our budget as an assembly will still depend on the government, of course, and of course the government will depend on what resources they can make available. But we will have a board which will include the leader of the opposition. That's what we're looking at. It will include them. It will include other people. I don't want it to the extent where we are completely in charge of hiring and firing the civil servants. In other countries, the chairman of that board is the speaker, and he controls. But I don't want it to be the extent that I have completely left out the civil servants, because they have a known system, and until we evolve to something else, then we will follow their rules and allow them to do hiring and firing through the clerk. That's how we're looking at it.
Okay.
Listen, in other countries, speakers don't get on the radio. They don't go on radio shows. But I felt compelled to do so several times.
And we're extremely grateful for you calling in, you know. And
but I'm not going to be pushed around. I'm not going to be pushed around by Arden McLean. He is just one person here. I got to get in now.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, and tell him that we treated. Let him know that we treated you well on here. We treated you well. Okay, thank you very much. One of our listeners has written in and said, "I listened with interest to all your comments. We just have to admit that our people are being left behind simply because we have some Caymanians who are unable to see greatness. This is especially true of the majority of our politicians. On top of this, there is only one thing these people fear more than greatness, and that's another Caymanian achieving greatness. How interesting. Now, another one of our listeners wrote in, and this will be a topic for another day. And they want to talk about permanent residence, and says it is too easy. It is too easy to acquire permanent residence. All one has to do is to acquire property here and do community service, like walk dogs for the Humane Society, in order to garner more points for their application. The Mile Road has it that as soon as some person acquires permanent residency, they transfer their property to a friend to help them get more points for the PR application, or else sell the property for a huge profit, and of course they forget all about community service then. Now this is a opinion that continues to resonate. People keep saying that this is happening. I hope the authorities take that into consideration and see what can be done about it. Whether or not, if you own a property, there is some caution put on that property in terms of sale or transfer of that property for a certain period of time after you acquire permanent residence or something. But we will talk more about this on Monday, hopefully, if no one from government comes on to the show as well. We've gone really past the time, but our controller in there has given us some latitude. I want to give both of you an opportunity for some final comments, closing comments as well. Ms. T.
So you consistently hear the concern that Caymanians have about not being treated fairly, not being given fair opportunities, and even when they demonstrate that they have the ability to do the work, they're still not given that opportunity. I have said on this show before, and will say it consistently, that I understand the benefit, and I think many of us do, of having persons come to the community with different ideas, different skill sets, different view, even a different view, because diversity is something that I actually value. The concern that I have, and many Caymanians have, is that when you have a proliferation of this behavior, and many Caymanians now call it abuse, you start to see a change in the local culture and the way in which we view resolving problems. So, for example, just this week we had the situation with what transpired at the East End Primary School, where Caymanians said that, enough was enough. Our children are important. We want all persons to recognize that education and our children are important. We will see more and more of this, in my mind, happening if proper attention is not paid towards discussing this whole issue honestly, where and Caymanians don't really ask for much. And as a matter of fact, one of the parents called me yesterday after the situation, and she said, we're even happy with the crumbs. And I thought that was I thought that was a little weird. She says, Miss T, we just want a fair opportunity, and we would be happy with if fairness translates into just having crumbs. We want something. So I didn't say too much about that. And then another parent, as I was taking my daughter to football, by the way, the traffic was horrendous, and she was saying that when they had a job fest yesterday, that there was quite a number of people there, and I don't know if it's true, I wasn't there, I was in traffic. The parents said that there were many Caymanians that were there, but Miss T, there were so many other non-Caymanians that were there also seeking employment. And she's saying, well, what is immigration doing to address the issue of persons being here and have no employment and really shouldn't be here? What steps are being taken to address that? I for the most part, I try to encourage people to think through their own problems and to think through the questions that they're asking, because I don't want folks to say Teresa say or whatever. No, I don't do that, right? Because it's just not helpful for the situation. But I encourage folks to continue to think on their own. But this whole issue of inequality and imbalance, that's not, when we address it, it's not hate speech.
Now, what I'd like you to do in your closing comments here is the issue of the law school that was written in on that. What's
those
your
parallels relate? And I mean, I didn't touch it because I know of my history with addressing that problem. And indeed, folks told me that they would ensure that my career would be destroyed because I've always dealt with this issue. So I tend to back away from that particular question from time to time. But the questions that I raised just now are not inconsistent with parallels to the concerns that that particular student made.
Okay. Dr. McPhee.
What perplexes me, OC, is the alarming lack of knowledge of so many of our politicians of the workings and procedures of the legislative body, the Legislative Assembly. Even though there's no job description to be an MLA, one would reasonably expect that some MLAs would at least immerse themselves in formal courses on fundamentals of the operation and development of the Westminster system of government under which they are supposed to operate and function. Some MLAs' knowledge of the Westminster system of government and its many supportive institutions are glaringly lacking or at least fundamentally flawed. The elected constitutional office of an MLA is essentially that of law-making and governing. Surely, to be constitutionally responsible in those primary roles, there ought to be some sort of minimum requirements other than money to fund an election and glib soundbite messages that mean nothing after election. I'm sure that those who founded and developed the Westminster system of government did not envisage that their representative institutions would fall into the control of novices and those who have no propensity to master their system. In the era of wooden ships and iron men, builders like the Archies had to have experience and knowledge of the shipbuilding, rigging, shipbuilding and rigging. They built and rigged historical functional beauties such as the magical gold field. Also, in the era of our constitutional development, our constituent heirs and information receptacles were pleasured by the constructive and eloquent debates of the MLAs such as Farrington, Hunter, Conley, Benson, the Bordens, Panton, McTaggart, Cockernell, and Tibbets. That list is not meant to be all of the orators and the lawmakers who made those of us who respect quality to have been part of that formative era. So why is it today in the global community where knowledge, information, and the reception of experience is so readily available that some of our MLAs are clearly behind those MLAs who serve in the era of our constitutional development? There are people in this country with knowledge of the Westminster system of government, legislative institutions, the science of politics and history of parliamentary practice and conventions, but they are so often cast aside because they will not impart knowledge tailored or they are on the wrong side of the egotistical fences. So, it is my opinion that before we begin this new era of legislative adventure, let us all tell something of the stage upon which our drama is put and of the background against which it is played. The last 185 years of our democracy has been an extraordinary enlargement of our founding members' ideas about the visible journey that they tread. In the same time, there was perhaps a certain diminution in their individual self-importance. So, in this era, some MLAs should be able to learn that there are matters in a whole far faster, more enduring, and more challenging, but rewarding than their ancestors ever dreamed or suspected. There is a sage saying that ignorance is the first penalty of pride, and that power wears out those who do not know how to use it. MLA's knowledge of their craft, like the telescope, can release their legislative imagination as no other implement has ever done, enlarging knowledge, compiling experience to chart the journey, and to steer the course of this country referring to the next handover to a different captain and crew.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. McFeel. Folks, I want to thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman and by extension For the Record into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. I also want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. There is always someone out there who is less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't do that, then I suggest you donate to a worthy charity, because we always want to consider those who need, not necessarily those who want or those who crave. I say to you, have a great day. Continue to support your radio station, Radio Cayman. Join Sterling, Dwayne Ebanks at 12 noon for Talk Today. Also, continue to follow the proceedings of our Legislative Assembly. They're still in Finance Committee on Breeze 105.3 FM. Have a great weekend, and as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these three beautiful, wonderful Cayman Islands.